Ron Gauci, thank you so much for making the time to join me. I couldn't think of a more appropriate person to be in conversation with, given your background and the challenging time that we are finding ourselves in right now. You're CEO at the moment of the Australian Information Industry Association, but you've got a background in a variety of turnarounds at Melbourne Storm, at Melbourne Polytechnic, you name it, you've gone in and fixed it. And so really I wanted to touch base with you today, because what I'm seeing in the community that I engage with online, in the conversations I'm in with CEOs and boards during the week, is a real, just a real challenge right now around how do you even contend with the level of uncertainty we're dealing with. We're in unprecedented circumstances. We're being challenged to an extraordinary degree. And so I wanted to really tap into some of your experience and wisdom. So thanks for making the time to have a chat.
Pleasure, Holly. Thank you very much.
So I wanted to kick off first with, as I said, you've dealt with a number of turnarounds. Can you just talk us through from a leadership standpoint, how do you walk in, day one post a challenge like a COVID arriving on the scene, and start thinking through how your business triages and responds to something like this? How do you deal with uncertainty and ambiguity like this?
Well, I think the very first thing that you need to do is walk in with a very clear head and a preparedness to learn quickly. So adapting and adopting really quickly is critical. So if it's a foreign environment, then learning is really important. So opportunities can actually come from these moments if we have clarity, if we have a really good understanding of both what we can do and what our clients need. I think you can actually turn this into an opportunity. And we're already seeing a massive change in the way we behave with each other, the way we're collaborating with each other, and we're seeing the genesis of some really good ideas.
So two things I want to ask you about there. One that you brought up was kind of being calm and clear as a leader, which is certainly an easier said thing than done right now. Do you have any tips for how people can actually get themselves in that calm and clear state? Because I think particularly when you've got relationships with your employees, people are standing people down, making tough calls on redundancies, supplier arrangements, you name it. How can we best support ourselves in leadership positions to be able to do what needs to be done through this time?
I think it starts with not getting caught up in the emotion and the panic. Okay, so there's no question that as a leader and a manager, and they're two different concepts, you're going to be listening to your staff, you're going to be listening to your stakeholders, you're going to be listening to your customers. I'm doing that now more so than before COVID, right? And some of that is reactive and some of that is proactive. And that's terrific. That's a lot of conversations. But what you don't want to do is then get caught up in the emotion or the panic or those things that drag you into I guess in one of those spaces that those dark places, if you like, because you are on your own effectively in this situation. So what you need to do is take in all that information, all of those conversations, but then be able to remove yourself. What do I know? What is my data telling me? What is my experience telling me? What am I hearing through all those messages? And how do I turn that into a positive form of action?
I wanted to ask you as well you talked about informing yourself or being in a learning process. I think one of the things that's challenging about COVID is the multitude of information that's updated, every instant, and the Chinese whispers and the different versions of the facts we're getting, and who's tracking what as a point of evidence, and who's tracking this country and that resource, and you name it. Who do you put your faith in, or how do you build a rigorous kind of source of information or personal cabinet to make decisions in this time? So you can make leadership less lonely, but you're also not just completely overwhelmed or getting caught in the madness of the fake news cycle or just the multitude of points of information you could be bombarded with.
Now is the time to actually have as many conversations as possible to really understand what the options are and how people are coping. So for me, I'm having many more conversations than I used to before COVID. But some of those is just to provide support for people, and others is to get ideas from people, and others is just to explore what the opportunities might be and toss around my own, I guess, experimentation.
Can I pick up on that point around, opportunism and ideas? Because I think that's a really interesting one. And one of the things I've had a lot of conversations with leaders about in the last couple of weeks is how do you create the bandwidth in the headspace when you're putting out fires and dealing with a situation that is changing with the degree that COVID is on a daily basis? How do you do that and create some bandwidth to be thinking about innovation and opportunity and green shoots? Any advice for that?
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I'm a person who makes most out of my 25-hour days and 8-day weeks. So I always make sure that I allocate time for the thinking process and isolate myself. I know we're all self-isolating, but isolate myself more so of just, okay, well, I'm now going to take this time to just think about these problems or this issue or whatever. So I think it's really important that we do find that time. In the pre-COVID days, we might have thought we could find that time when we're on a plane or when we're driving to an appointment. Guess what? We're not doing that now. So one of the reasons why I have back-to-back appointments each day now is because I'm actually not in a car or on a plane or those, those dead minutes of a day that add up to, because most people have about 2 hours worth of dead minutes in a day where you could convert that to thinking time. When you are in this environment where you're having conversations face-to-face over the computer, and it's really easy to do, and I think that people are really discovering just how easy it has been to do that, that it's easy, therefore, to then be meeting and doing things and then not thinking. Correct. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about decision-making. One of the things I think I'm watching a lot of people grapple with is just how tragic choices, options where really neither of the paths or none of the multitude of paths in front of you is ideal, is pleasant, is positive. You're making tough choices on how to scale things back, people decisions, you name it. Do you have any frameworks for decision-making? Do you use cost-benefit analysis? Do you think through SWOTs? What do you use as a guide or a framework to help you think through ultimately which course of action to take?
Yeah, well, I'm a firm believer in SWOTs and scenarios. So everything I've ever done has been around scenarios: worst case, best case, likely case, etc. Now that it puts extra pressure on people because how many models you want to work with, but everything I do has multitudes of models to work scenarios, and then you're able to zoom in on what is a more likely scenario and then what the opportunities are. The easiest thing at this time is to just go and cut costs. But what you need to be thinking about is, because I'm a firm believer that nothing grows while you're choking it. So
I like that phrase, nothing grows while you're choking it.
So if you're going to continue to cut costs, that's all very fine. But what's your business going to look like when we come out of this? And it's a when, it's not an if. You might be thinking, gee, I just want to survive through this. But okay, let's say you do. Then what is your business going to look like afterwards? It could be in a worse position because you've choked it to the point of near death. So you've got to think about those things as well. That's why I prefer in my transformation agenda with organisations to look at where the revenue opportunities are. Every organisation in the current situation that may not have a physical contact or whatever it is finding a new way of doing business. We're doing business. Well, we're seeing restaurants moving to the touchless home delivery market. How-to videos. We're seeing organisations go virtual instead of physical. It'd be fair to say that most of the retailers that are struggling at the moment were probably struggling before. They just didn't need this to hit, right? So I think that's why it's really important to really understand how you turn this into an opportunity, how you ensure that you come out of this, but more so with an opportunity post this, because we're going to have a new way of working from this point on, no question.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of people are increasingly coming to terms with, that we've probably accelerated our transition to the future of work and the structural adjustment the economy was going to go under over the next 5-10 years anyway, and that there really is no returning to business as it once was. This will be a new norm that will come out of the other side of this. To your scenario comment, I think a lot of people are wrestling now with what's the right way to approach dealing with the here and now and also starting to plan for that future. Do you fuse the two when you think about your scenario planning in terms of best case, potential case, worst case scenario? Or do you split and go, okay, we've got to deal with the here and now, and then we've got this separate group, or I'm allocating that separate brain space to think about innovation and kind of the business beyond the immediate terms of the crisis?
You can't take a slotted approach or a segmented approach. It has to be fused. Because at the end of the day, if you've got your scenarios well mapped out, then you should be able to pick the best parts of those, and which of those is doable, which is not. So really, it's about then fusing and getting. There's going to be lots of blurred lines, but I firmly believe that if you've got your models right and you've got all your information in front of you correctly, you should be able to then pick what's going to work, what's not going to work, and then create a new picture, a new scenario from that information.
From the turnarounds you've done before, Melbourne Storm, the Polytechnic, what are your biggest takeaways for leaders in terms of things that you, I guess, come back to routinely and go, every time I look at a situation of challenge in a business, these are the things or the anchor points or the points of truth that I know we're going to have to find or work through, or that I can consistently rely on?
Yeah, well, it starts with, again, what do you know? So the information you collect. So what have I learned from my observation time? So that stage one. What did I learn that is going to now allow me to put in place a plan? So the successful trait of transformational leaders is to understand the extent of the problem, put in place a plan to address it, clearly articulate it and communicate it in such a way that they get the buy-in from the stakeholders, and then they have the right people around them to then execute. But those, for me, are the four critical steps or stages of true transformational leadership. And true transformations are not just about changing your strategy or changing your geography or changing your product. If you look at history, the best examples of the best transformations are the ones where you're actually changing the user experience. So experiential transformation is the most powerful transformation of all. So even now, how do we change the experience that people have of our business whilst in this virtual environment? And then we change that forever beyond this point. But experiential transformations, we know the basic fundamentals. People keep doing what they enjoy doing, and they'll tell someone about it. They'll stop doing what they don't enjoy doing, and they'll tell 10 people about it. So if you create a really good experience from an opportunity that stems from a need that you know your customer has, and it's needs-based selling, if you like, then I think that's how you get stakeholder buy-in. But those four steps are the ones I've always gone by over decades, and it's held true for me each time.
Observing leadership more broadly out in industry, out around the world right now, what do you think examples of good leadership look like, and what do you think examples of less than ideal leadership look like right now?
Well, we're seeing a lot of examples of less than ideal leadership right now.
Yes. We won't refer to particular political officers,
no,
but perhaps more at an industry or a business level.
Yeah. But I think I know you well enough to see the frustration you must have when.
Oh yeah, from a public policy standpoint, without a doubt.
So I think hopefully we'd agree that what I see of the poor leadership approaches are where it's reactive. Each day sounds different, or each stage sounds different. It's not a progressive plan, and then you should be able to measure impacts, and then react to those. So where are we measuring the impact? Or and I talk the we globally. So leaders need to say, okay, well, I've implemented this strategy, which is part of a broader strategy, and I've measured the impact, and it worked, so we're going to continue, or it hasn't worked, so we're going to make the change immediately, rather than just throw money at things or throw ideas at things and then hope that it all comes together. In a crisis, the three C's that are critical at all times is communication, communication, and communication. Right. So it's really important as you're getting stakeholder buy-in, whether they're voters or they're your staff. It's really important to keep communicating, and they need to hear that clear message. They need to hear it consistently, and they need to see an impact that comes from it.
And from a pragmatic standpoint, because I think that's a really critical one. A lot of people are struggling with what do we go and say to customers right now? How often regularly should we be talking to our people? What do we say about the things that we don't have certainty on yet? Any advice on do's or don'ts when it comes to that communicate?
Yeah, well, the first don't is don't communicate if you've got nothing of relevance to say. right? So I think people feel, okay, well, I need to communicate. Well, make sure what you're saying resonates, that has meaning, it has impact. Otherwise, please don't say it, because the other component of all this is about trust. Trust takes a lifetime to earn and a moment to lose, and you may never recover from it again. So if you want people to trust you, I remember giving a presentation to a cohort in one of those organizations you mentioned, without being specific, where I had to deliver what I learned. And what I learned was all of these things were all the worst possible news I could possibly communicate. So I gave them the very worst case position, and it was really, really bad news. And that was to all the staff members. And at the end of that, I got a standing ovation. I thought I was actually going to get shot because the news was that bad. And when I asked leaders why is it that they applauded and appreciated the information, they said, well, firstly, Ron, you told them what the situation was. You didn't gild the lily. Secondly, you had a plan, and the plan sounded reasonable. And thirdly, you got a reputation for getting things done, and people have confidence in that ability. And that's that whole trust component. Right? I trust what you're saying. I trust what you're suggesting, and I trust that you will get things done. I think as a leader, that now more than ever before, that's so critical.
That power of transparency combined with a plan. People are willing to give grace, I think, in moments like this of challenge in particular, if there's those two things present.
Yeah, particularly in these times, because it's unprecedented. So if all that stuff is uncertain, then people look for certainty. And the one certainty is, do I trust this person as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point as well, and I know we've spoken about this many times over, like never waste a crisis, in the sense of what this moment of urgency and imperative can allow you to do in terms of creating something that's healthier, more prosperous, more sustainable out the other side.
Every crisis that I have seen and been a part of and been responsible for has come out the other end in a far better position than they were before the crisis hit. So I absolutely agree with your comments there. Every crisis needs to be seen as an opportunity.
Now, I'm mindful of your Zoom schedule and making sure you get on with your busy day. But can I ask if there's a key takeaway you can leave people with, something that at a time where a lot of people are struggling to find the way through, that they can be thinking about doing today or putting in place this week? What's the bit of advice that they can put into practice?
I would say, other than what we've already spoken about, empathy. I think if you really do understand the situation, understand the opportunity, understand how to develop the plan, and understand the people that you need to be on board with you, having empathy with their circumstance and helping them through and having conversations is such a critical thing at the moment. There's never been a better time to just pick up the phone. I've been doing that more so last week, just checking to make sure everyone's fine. Making sure everyone's okay, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. So
absolutely. And it goes back to that old adage, isn't it? People might forget what you did or what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So
correct. So I know you were looking probably for something more radical or powerful than that, but it's as simple as that for me.
No, I think that comment never rings more true than at times where we're collectively struggling, and we know a lot of people are facing a multitude of different circumstances as well that we've got to be really mindful of.
Yeah.
Well, Ron, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Wishing you well with everything you and AIIA are doing. And as I said, thank you so much for sharing the experience and the expertise you've got in this area with the community today.
Thanks, Holly, and keep up your good work.
Thank you.